Good evening, and welcome to the June gathering of the Maine Public Book Club. I'm your host, Bill Nemitz, and this evening we welcome back New York Times best-selling author Jennifer Finney Boylan and her latest memoir, Cleavage, Men, Women, and the Space Between Us. This book offers a poignant and insightful look not only at Boylan's transition to life as a transgender woman, but also the political and social landscape that transgender people face as they navigate their way from whom they're perceived to be to who they really are. Jenny, who joined us in 2023 to talk about Mad Honey, the riveting novel she co-wrote with Jodi Picoult, once again regales us in this book with her empathy, her grit, and as always, her wry humor, which we're looking forward to tonight. Much to talk about here, but first, as usual, I want to thank Sherman's Maine Coast Bookshops, the Park Danforth, and Coffee by Design for their generous support at the club. They make events like this possible. I'd also like to recognize our bookstore partners, where many of you picked up your copy of Cleavage, thanks to Bookstacks in Bucksport, None Such Books and More in South Portland, Mockingbird Bookshop in Bath, Sherman's Maine Coast Bookshops, DDG Booksellers in Farmington, Left Bank Books in Belfast, the Book Tenders in York, Print in Portland, Oliver and Friends in Waterville, and last but not least, Fiction in Wiscasset. Now, if you have a question during our conversation tonight, send it over to us at fun@mainepublic.com, and I'll try to work it into the discussion. So without further ado, let's get started. Jenny Doylan, welcome back.
Hi, Bill. It's
Good to see you again.
It's lovely to be back on Maine Public Radio in my home state.
That's right. And in fact, you're joining us from Central Maine right now. So
I am joining you from Belgrade Lakes.
There you go. Well, I'm going to start right off with the big picture question here. You wrote Cleavage at a time when transgender people find themselves in the eye of a culture storm that encompasses politics, religion, race, class, and alas, gender. Now, you've never been accused of being timid, yet I wonder, as you hit the last keystroke and off this book went to the publisher, what were your thoughts about what lay ahead in this?
Well,
I
didn't know what lay ahead because the book has been in progress for many years, and I hit send last summer without really knowing what the future was going to be. Nonetheless, here we are. And this book is in many ways a bookend to my 2003 memoir, She's Not There, A Life in Two Genders, a book which, unexpectedly, I think, at least to me, became a bestseller and really became one of the first books that highlighted transgender experience. And that led to, in many ways, it gave me, it put me in a different literary world because I was on Oprah and all of that. And also back then when I first came out as trans, and this is now just the turn of the century. God, it sounds so old when I say that, doesn't it? Back in the turn of the century. This was pretty unknown territory, and at least, it wasn't unknown to me, but it was unknown to lots of other people. And the general response at that time was mostly kindness and curiosity and supportiveness, including that from my 85-year-old Republican mother, who said, when I told her I was trans, who simply said to me, "Well, love will prevail." And so in my life, love mostly has prevailed. But there was a way in which, because nobody had formally been given instructions on how to hate me yet, or people like me, there was this kind of sense of, well, you've always been our friend and we'll follow you wherever we need to go, even if this is not something we completely get. And so there was, back then, it was a little obscure, but mostly people were ready to follow me where I needed to go. And so flash forward 20 years, and my or more than 20 years, but it's 25 years after Transition and 22 years after She's Not There was published. And it's a very different terrain. In some ways, things are easier because this is not unknown territory anymore. At least it's less unknown. But it's also true that with increased visibility has come increased blowback. And now there are all of these forces who have decided to put people like me in the crosshairs of culture wars. And, it hurts my feelings a little bit because, I didn't set out to hurt anybody's feelings. I wasn't born the way I was born to get anybody mad. I don't want to play soccer against your kid. I don't really want anything from anybody other than a sense of the same love and respect you'd show anybody else. And so here we are. So that's why I wrote Cleavage. Cleavage does two things. One, it compares coming out as trans now to coming out in 2000. But I hope, at least more broadly and less politically, it looks in depth at the difference between the lives of men and the lives of women, at least as I've lived them. It's not, the last word. But, if men are from Mars and women are from Venus, I'm definitely an intergalactic space traveler. So that's what
I want to touch on one comparison, then and now comparison. And in this case, I'm going to take you all the way back to kindergarten, because one of my favorite scenes in the book was when you were in kindergarten and Mrs. Is it Bassoon, your teacher?
Bassoon.
She's reading the class The Marvelous Land of Oz, which is about the young boy Tip, who finds out that he can be queen of the Emerald City if he goes back to being the girl that he was when he was born.
Yes, Tip has been transformed into or the Ozma, the Queen of Oz, has been hidden. Princess Ozma then has been hidden.
Princess. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but this one scene where the class goes to recess, and you're still looking at this book, fascinated, while the rest of the kids are outside. And then when you go outside, you look back and see Mrs. Bassoon, the teacher, with the book still in her hand, just standing there kind of staring at you. And it made me wonder, could she get away with reading that book to her class today?
Well, I guess the Marvelous Land of Oz? I wonder. That's a good question, Bill. I think because Baum is considered a classic, probably, but you never know. I think I'm the president of Pan America, which is actually the world's largest defender of free expression and writers worldwide, but especially in this country. And one of the things we're really facing is book bans in this country, including, sadly, several of mine, including Good Boy and She's Not There and Mad Honey. Good Boy was one of the books that the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, singled out for removal from the libraries at the U.S. Naval Academy and West Point. And, it's a book about dogs, really. And my relationship to my dogs, but maybe, I don't know, maybe this administration is really mostly cat lovers. Maybe that explains it. I don't know.
Yeah. I also want to, you already brought this up, but I want to early on talk about your mother, Hildegard, who.
Yes, Hildegard. And the craziest thing about my mother is that people actually called her Hildegard. It wasn't Hildy or Hilda, Hildegard.
Yeah.
And
I remember a strong sound to it.
Yeah, it's an old Italian name.
Yeah, great.
And yeah, my mother.
I can think of no more powerful moment in the book than when you, as you talked about this, when you come out to her, she throws her arms around you and tells you that love will prevail. And then she quotes, of all things, Corinthians 1:13. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. What an amazing woman.
What an
Talk a
amazing
little bit
woman.
about her, just because, she was a evangelical Christian, I believe. Is that,
Yes.
do I recall that correctly?
Yeah. Although she wasn't evangelical in the same way that we think of it uh, in that, well, what that term means to most people now. But her Lutheran church was called the Evangelical Free Church. So I call her an evangelical Christian, but I should probably make that caveat.
Mhm.
But yeah, she was a conservative her whole life. I think she voted for Alf Landon in 1936. She it was the only time that she uh, uh, broke her streak of voting for Republicans.
Mm.
I think in 36 the phrase was "Don't change horses in midstream," which unfortunately is advice that I was not able to follow my own self.
That's good.
But maybe she's an I'm getting all teary. Well, look, she was able to put love at the center of her faith, her Christian faith. And that was kind of the long and the short of it, really, that, we're here to love each other. We're here to find God's grace in each other and to treat each other with love. And I'm not a Lutheran, but I am a member of the Riverside Church in New York City, which is a UCC church, and that's pretty much what. If I have a creed or a credo, that's it. That we're here to love each other and to try to find God's grace in each other. I mean, and I don't want to get all woo woo about it, because there are plenty of things in faith that I think are just best kept private. But I know that I got a sense of hope and buoyancy and humor and love from my mother and my father too. But mom in particular was just
Yeah.
remarkable. She was always able to see the good side of things. She was always able to see the funny side of things. She had a great sense of humor, and so I always thought of her as the phrase I used to use is cork-like. She would always float to the top of where she was.
Well, and I always love somebody who uses scripture to build people up rather than tear them down, and
Yeah.
that anecdote epitomizes that. Where
Indeed. And
true.
isn't that what we should all be doing? Isn't that really why we're here? Is to, I mean, look, there are a lot of different ways of being human, and I know the transgender thing, I think, upsets people because, well, for one thing, a lot of people just don't know what it is, and it seems like, God, why would you change the body that God gave you? And it's a good question, but people who ask that question of me sometimes are wearing glasses, or hearing aids, or have pacemakers, or have had their appendix removed. And if you were born with a condition, with a sense of yourself that is, and I really do believe that the trans impulse has its basis in neurology and biology. It's not a fad. It's not some crazy thing that we do because we're confused. It's a thing. In a way, I always thought of it as a challenge that I was given by nature or God or whoever you want to say to ask me, do you have the courage to become the person you were meant to be? Are you willing to be a kind of walking litmus test of how loving and considerate other people can be? And I remember I used to think, really, there were times when I used to think this was a great curse, but in time I thought of it, I came to understand that it was a gift. But I also thought, really, this is my gift? Couldn't I have been like rich or something, or or
Win the lottery?
have ESP or something? Is that really, you want me to be a woman? Really, it doesn't seem very practical, but
Yeah.
we all.
I'm going to go to an audience question. We have we have a number of questions from our audience that I'm going to try to work in.
Take it.
This reader asks, a review I read that inspired me to purchase this book mentioned your unwavering commitment to raw honesty. What are your thoughts on this designation?
Raw honesty? Raw honesty sounds a little cruel. It sounds like one of those people who goes around, you know, uh,
No editing function?
what's the thing that someone goes to the doctor and the doctor says, well, you've got cancer. And he says, I want a second opinion. And the doctor says, well, you're also ugly. Um, I don't know. It's hard to tell the truth. I mean, I don't think I have any, I didn't corner the market I didn't corner the truth market. We can spend our whole lives trying to run from certain parts of ourselves that were, and it was, I mean, look, it's embarrassing. At least for me, coming out as trans, I was afraid everybody would laugh at me. I was afraid I would, and more seriously, I was afraid I'd lose my family. I was afraid I'd lose my job. It's worth saying, even now, 12, how long has it been?
20,
25 years later, Colby College was very generous to me when I came out, and I'll always be grateful for the kindness of that community and the Waterville community and my little town in Belgrade. Nobody pointed at me and laughed. Everyone said, well, Jenny, you've always been a good friend and you've always been a good neighbor, and we'll make room for you. At least that's the way it was back then. So am I raw? Do I have raw honesty? I mean, I guess the only thing I would cop to with that is just the sense that there are moments in this book when I admit I don't come off well. And unlike She's Not There, where I really wanted everybody to love me, I think in Cleavage it was important to note that there are some mistakes that I've made, and to accept responsibility for that too.
Mm-hmm. Another reader asks, how would you describe your writing style? Conversational, non-linear?
Well, are we having a non-linear conversation, Bill? I love conversations.
I did a double take on that one too.
Well, I do like music that kind of goes in circles, and that theme and variations.
Or starting something with one paragraph and ending it with the same paragraph, only it's different, which you do in the book.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea of making people feel, I don't know, maybe it's just who I am, but I feel like conversational feels a little random. So the writing is not random. It is slaved over and the writing is very careful, but it's also writing that I want to feel friendly and familiar, even when I'm doing really strange things. And there's a few chapters in this that are show that I really do have a PhD in English, but it's I want, it's very funny. I mean, I often get these letters of people who say, well, I read your book and now I want to be your friend. And I'm like, well, I mean, I want to be friend. There's a difference between being friendly and wanting to be friends with everybody. Oh, now I sound hostile. I'm not.
Well, it sounds like you're describing the Jenny who wrote She's Not There in some ways, right?
Yeah, I think the main difference I think between Cleavage and She's Not There is that I think She's Not There has a sense of apology to it a little bit. I'm kind of trying to win people over, and I think there's an air in that book of saying to people, to readers, I'm really not a bad person, and I just want you to understand and forgive me. And I guess I'm less interested in being forgiven now, because I don't really feel like I've done anything wrong, at least not in terms of coming out as trans and living my life in what I hope is a more honest and truthful way. There are plenty of things there are plenty of things I have to apologize for, but being trans is not one of them.
Mm-hmm. This seems like a good time for you to share some of the book with us.
Okay.
You have an excerpt.
I was thinking I would just start with the beginning. I'll just read you 5 or 6 paragraphs from the opening. This is the introduction. It's called Both Sides Now, which was actually the original title. I was going to call it Both Sides Now because I like naming books after song titles.
Mhm.
The last second I came up with Cleavage. We can talk about that later, but
Sure.
it's this way. I was born in 1958 on June 22nd, the second day of summer. It was also the birthday of Chris Christopherson and Meryl Streep, both of whom I later resembled, although not at the same time. I began the story of my life with these words in She's Not There, a memoir published in 2003. At the time, it seemed reasonable enough, beginning with the beginning. Now, I wonder whether I chose the right companions. Instead of Streep and Christopherson, I could have just as easily picked others born that day, Elizabeth Warren, say, or John Dillinger, or Dan Brown. Would my book have landed differently if my chaperones had been the senator, or the gangster, or the author of the Da Vinci Code? Sometimes I think about it, all the other lives I might have led. At the time of its publication, She's Not There was a real brouhaha. I was on Oprah 5 times, Larry King twice, Will Forte imitated me on Saturday Night Live. Though hardly the first trans memoir, it did come out at a moment when things were changing, at least a little. I hope She's Not There, the book I call SNOT, did push the needle at a crucial moment. The publisher's promotional copy now calls it the book that jump-started the transgender rights movement. Those are big words. But She's Not There was a story told by someone for whom everything was new. The voice is that of a woman who's still in the late stages of an amazing ride, her clothes still smoking after she's been shot out of a cannon. Memories of transgender people are almost always about that moment when a little morning dew is still twinkling on the cobwebs of their transitions. And there's a good reason why so many stories about people like me focus on that passage. It is, by any measure, an astonishing thing. What in the world is it like to go from a man to a woman, or vice versa, or to some identity even more liberating than that? But a more important, if less scandalous, question is, what's it like for those who finally have what they've been impossibly yearning for all their lives? Indeed, what's life like for transgender people as we age, as we inevitably morph from someone covered with sequins into someone whose hair is gray? And what of the people we've been and our histories from the times before? Surely all of that can't just vanish like breath on a mirror. I've spent almost a third of my life over here. I have stories to tell, now that my spangles are no longer aflame, about the difference between the worlds of men and of women, not to mention the fertile territory that lies in between.
Yeah, great start.
The rest of
were speaking. I want to get back
it's
to
downhill right after that.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Go ahead.
I said I wish the rest of it was that good. It goes downhill right after that. That's
I want to
really
get back to the book and its characters. Your family, of course. I guess this is the part where I give you a chance to brag about your children, your daughter Zai and your son
Yeah.
Sean. So
Well,
let it rip.
okay. They're pretty cool. They're on either side of 30, 29 and 31 now. Shawnee's an engineer. He does something with robots and computers in Michigan. I can't explain it, but he's good at it anyhow.
Nor would he expect you to.
No. And Zai is a mental health counselor in the Boston area. And so they both play a role in this book, but the one that I think will come as the biggest shock to readers, and is a shock to me, is that Zai, formerly my son Zach, comes out as trans her own self at about age 25 or 6. And when she comes out, my reaction is surely nowhere near as generous or as welcoming as my own evangelical Christian Republican mother's welcome to me 25 years before. Even though I know a lot about transgender people, believe me, having met maybe, I don't know, 10,000 of us over the last 25 years. But when Zai comes out as trans, my first thought is, oh no, because for one thing, I thought it was all my fault. I was afraid I made this look fun. And also, it's just it can be a really hard life. You, it does take a certain amount of resolve and tenacity. And I know a lot of transgender people who've had, the bark stripped right off them by the cruelty of the world. Nobody wants their child's life to be hard. And that's what I was afraid of. Also, I just felt really guilty. I felt like, oh no, I felt like, oh, did I do this? This is going to be hard for her. And yet,
Yeah.
she has thrived. She's so much happier than she was. She went back to school. She got her graduate degree, and I think she's going to be married next summer. I think.
Good.
The kids are all right.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Zai, because when you were sitting at the restaurant outside at the restaurant on Cape Cod,
Yeah.
I was struck by how the parent-child relationship often starts to reverse itself as we grow older. That in turn made me think of the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young song "Teach Your Children," and the verse, "And you of tender years can't know the fears that your elders grew by, and so please help them with your youth. They seek the truth before they can die." Can you tell us a little bit about how, as much as our children learn from us, so do we come to learn from them?
Oh, Bill, you're good, aren't you? That's awfully astute. Teach your parents well, and know they love you. So in the last 25 years, there's been a real change in the way, especially young people, come out and identify as trans. And I'm very old-fashioned in many ways. I don't think of a lot of the younger generation, I think, is having has some members of the younger generation are having more fun with gender. They play with gender. They don't mind being androgynous. There's a great celebration of non-binary identities, or at least there used to be, but until January of this year. But I think it's very different from the way I identify and the way I went about. I mean, I don't think of myself as a woman with an asterisk. I think, at my age, which is I'm now I turned 67 last week. Woohoo! By the way, and it was our 37th wedding anniversary. I learned that the 37th wedding anniversary traditional present is wool, which strikes me as a bit of a, it's a little disappointing. After 37 years, I'm getting a sweater, really?
Well,
anyway, so there's a real difference between the way young people in particular identify and talk about the transgender and non-binary experience than the way I did, and the way in some ways I still do. And I see that in Zai. I also see it in my students at Barnard. I'm sure that there is, and there's just many more transgender people and non-binary people out there. And I think that's partially what's been fueling some of the panic around the issue. I think that as long as we were kind of relatively obscure and kind of living in the shadows, I think it was, there's nothing to be concerned about, at least according to some conservative people. But there's a lot as it became more acceptable to come out. I think more people came out, and more people came out at a younger age. And I think that, listen, it can be really alarming. It is really alarming if you're a parent trying to deal with this. Look, I'm a transgender woman. I've been out for 25 years now or more. It was alarming for me when my child came out as trans. So what must it be like for anyone else? And I just want to say to any parents that are listening to this, if you can't immediately embrace your child's transition, if you can't immediately get with the program, if you mess up with the pronouns, obviously it's something you're going to, if you can, try to get your mind around. But if you struggle at first, you're only being human, and you should forgive yourself and not, and look, this is hard, and no one, you don't need to beat yourself up for not being the perfect parent. And that goes for when you're, whether your kid is trans or whether anything is happening with your children. There's no such thing as the perfect parent. There's only the parent who hangs in there and tries to understand, and tries, as my mother said, to let love prevail.
Mhm. Let's talk about spouses. Another
Let's
scene
talk
late in the
about,
book. I'm sorry, go ahead. You're cutting out. I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry, I said let's talk about spouses.
Okay. Another scene late in the book begins with your wife, Dee Dee, waking you up with a cup of coffee, and noticeably serious, she tells you to get dressed. She has something she needs to tell you. I have to tell you, my heart was pounding as the two of you walked up French's Mountain near your house, and you and I, with no idea what was coming. Yet in the end, she simply wanted to tell you how she could not imagine life without you. And as Richard Russo, your friend, later said, he later called yours and Dee Dee's marriage, quote, a great love story. Uh, Let me flip the script. Could you imagine life without Dee Dee?
No, no, absolutely not. And it is worth, if you're listening to this, and you have a relationship, if you're married or if you have a long-term relationship, to think about what sorts of changes could you accept in the person that you love and still remain in the marriage and be um, and still be in love with them. If you're, I mean, we've been married for 37 years now, and if you're married for that long or longer, you know, if your marriage is the same marriage that you had when on the day you got married, your marriage has probably failed. I mean, the challenge of marriage is that we change and we morph, and not just physically, although there is that as well. But people gain faith, they lose faith, they get sick, they decide that they want to live in Italy, they change jobs, they tell you that they want to have 5 children, they want to tell you that they want to have no children. So we are constantly changing in the relationships that we have, and there's it is the old question of what is the essence of us that remains the same. There's an old saying about the old New England farmer who talks about how great his shovel is, because the shovel he has, he said, it's going to last forever. I've replaced the blade twice and the handle 4 times, but it's a great shovel because it'll last forever. And and we're all like that, right? We're all like the shovel as we get glasses, as our hair goes gray, as we change in all the ways we change, and so does the person that you love. So, I mean, I think people think of Dee Dee's love for me, staying with me, even though I've changed genders, as extraordinary. And it is extraordinary. I don't want to belittle that. Believe me, it's a wonder that I'm grateful for every single day. But I think accepting change, both in the people that we love as well as in ourselves, is kind of the job that we're here for. If you're married long enough, and if you're healthy enough and you last long, you're going to be 90 years old, you and your loved one. And with any luck, you will love each other more than the day you got married. And the stories you'll have to tell. But you will not be, that 25-year-old, that 30-year-old when you started. So, it's all about change, but something in us does remain the same. And I would call that thing soul. That's our essence. I mean, I don't know if it's I don't know what you want to call it, but there is something, heart, call it our heart, call it our soul, but there is something in us. Thornton Wilder said that there's something eternal in the world, And that thing, it's not stars and it ain't trees. That thing is human beings. There's something eternal inside every human being.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to think of it as an inner voice, that voice that it might change, but it's the same voice inside you that
Hmm.
speaks to you in moments both important and not so important. But being raised a Catholic, I get the soul thing completely.
I love that.
But it really, there really is something to that. I want to talk a little bit about, I guess we'll call it therapy and your sessions with, is it Dr. Fernway? I know this, I believe this is a
Oh,
fictitious name,
yeah,
right?
that's a name. That name means homesickness in German.
Oh, I see.
He had a German name, and that's the name the pseudonym I gave him. I think it's a good one.
Yeah. Uh, and how frustrated you felt as he tried unsuccessfully to fit you into one of his many theories. You write, my thought is that if you have a theory that does not bring kindness and compassion to people who are suffering, what you really need more than anything else is a new theory. Talk to us a little bit about how today's rules become tomorrow's absurdities. And you cite a couple of
Yeah.
those in that part of the book.
Well, if you think about it, think of all the things that are legal now or known to be true now that even within our lifetimes were either illegal or doubted. You know, marijuana is now legal in some form in many states, and yet within my lifetime a person could be sent to prison for that. Same marriage equality, so-called same-sex marriage. Marriage equality is now the law of the land, at least for now, still. Within my lifetime, obviously there was nothing near that, nothing near that kind of acceptance. So the the things that we can accept do seem to change over time, and I guess that is an occasion for optimism, but it can also be really frustrating because I mean, right now we're at this moment where transgender people are being defined by other people. People are being told, we were being told, you can't do this, you can't do that. You're not who you say you are. You're not what you know yourself to be. And people who have never met me, quite frequently online, are unafraid to tell me that they know my soul better than I do my own self. So I think we have to be very careful about treating people like issues, treating people like abstractions, because people are not issues. People are human beings, complicated human beings trying to do the best they can with the weird hand of cards they've been dealt in this world. And uh, I'll get a letter in the mail from someone who says, "Well, why can't you just be normal?" And I'll just say, what is a normal person like? I've never met one. Tell me what they must be like. I mean, and to be quite honest, how many of the most virulent anti-gay, anti-trans actors in this country wind up then later being arrested for abuse, for child porn, for seeing prostitutes. It happens again and again and again. The leaders of these megachurches, and I don't say that to denigrate faith, because as we said earlier in this conversation, I'm a person of faith, and I think it's important that we try to find the love in each other. But when we start inflicting our theories of the world on each other without understanding that people are not theories, people are humans, well, that's where you can really do some damage to people who deserve better.
Mm. Speaking of the good doctor, you note that all these years later, you'd like to, and I quote, push a bean up his nose. It's one of many lines throughout the book when I laughed out loud. Another was your mother's suggested title for the book, Thanks for the Memories.
Oh,
I
thanks,
almost
Mom.
fell off I almost fell off my chair at that one. But
Yeah.
can you reflect on how humor, even when it comes to these deadly serious subjects, is an important part of your writing?
Well, I mean, humor, it's funny when we think about humorous writing or comic writing. I mean, we have some comic geniuses who are writing among us, including Dave Barry and Carl Hyacin, who I just saw at the Nantucket Book Festival 2 weeks ago, um, and David Sedaris, and so many other really funny writers. But I'm not a funny writer like that. My 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 comedy, such as it is, I think comes from a place of well, I don't want to be too pompous about this, but a place of hurt, a place of I don't want to say suffering because that sounds so too, but um, I think the best kind of humor is the kind of humor that is just one heartbeat away from tears. And if you're transgender, and not just trans, and there's a lot of conditions you can be dealt with in this world. But for me, growing up with this from age 5 or 6 with this weird contradiction in my heart, it was kind of like being born with an existential dilemma. There you are. You're like 7 years old, and you're trying to solve the mind body problem. you know, and so why? I mean, I'll have to say, most of the transgender people I know are really funny, and it's some of the humor is has a lot of an edge to it. Some of it is there's a real bitterness behind it, but I think it is the best kind of humor. The humor that comes from, a face that has recently dried tears, but just recently dried tears.
The tears of a clown.
The tears, the tears of a human, the tears of someone who has, when we think of humor in this country, we think of, it's easy to think of like fart jokes and the antics of frat boys and the like, and there's a lot of like cruelty in some humor, there's kind of a meanness to some humor. That's not the kind of humor that does anybody any good. The kind of humor that I'm trying to write is the kind of humor that shows that the best response to a world in trouble is joy, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not a joy that negates the trouble of the world. It's a joy that accepts it and celebrates its absurdity and then tries to make something good.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go to another reader question here, and this goes to what we spoke earlier. You mentioned the title and how we're going to get to that. This is a good way to do it. Uh, this reader asks, what was the thinking behind the cover? Some may say it is misleading over the content. I kind of fall in that camp. Of course, the cover shows Sophia Loren and her name escapes me.
Jane
Jane
Mansfield.
Mansfield. Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk first about the cover, and then let's talk a little bit about what you ultimately landed on for a title.
Well, we went back and forth on the title. I mean, the book is called Cleavage, of course, and so I was, there were all kinds of titles and of covers, and the publisher had these kind of literary. There was one with like a heart torn in half, and I just kind of sent them, look, how about something more eye-catching and funny? And I sent them a half a dozen, mostly as a joke, images, one of which was the famous picture of Sophia Loren giving Jane Mansfield the side eye. And it's important that people read the subtitle, which is Men, Women, and the Space Between Us, because if you don't, it's easy to think this book is about the history of breasts. And I'm sorry that there are not more breasts in the book. If I didn't properly, maybe I don't know. It was something I meant to do and never got around to. There was an excerpt from the book that appeared in the Washington Post, and the title, as you know, as a longtime columnist, you know that usually you don't get to pick your own title. They decided to name it "Mind the Gap: on Cleavage by Jennifer Boylan.
Oh,
There was a lot of comments online by people who felt misled. Clearly people hoping that this was going to be a whole essay about bosoms, and a little angry that I started talking about the transgender thing. Oh no, not that again, instead. So anyway, that's where we are. I'm still a little uncertain about the cover, but it is certainly, pardon the expression, eye popping. It's also brassiere popping, but anyway,
and then some. Yeah.
yeah, the title, we were going to call it Both Sides Now. For the longest time, that was the working title. But then I wanted to talk about division in this country, both between men and women, between liberals and conservatives, between straight people, gay people, cis people, trans people, all that stuff. So I was just looking through the thesaurus at, the word for division and separation, and I came upon cleavage, and I thought, oh, that might work. And I tested it out one night at a dinner party. I think actually it was that same night. I said, what would you think if I called my new book Cleavage? And my host, an old friend named Steve from college days, immediately started laughing so hard he fell off his chair. So I thought, well, I don't know maybe I should have asked him if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but it was definitely a
right.
So that's how I wound up being the author of Cleavage. And the good thing is I can go into a bookstore anywhere and say, "Excuse me, do you have my Cleavage? I'm looking for Jenny Martin's Cleavage. Could you put Cleavage on display?" And so on, endlessly.
Oh, I love it. You talk about your friend at the party. You talk a lot about a lot of friends in this book, and there are many. We have a question here from Stephen from Lemoyne, and he asks, I appreciate your reflections on early friendships in part one, as well as glimpses throughout at how those fared over the course of your transition. I'm wondering, since transition, have you found a difference in how open cis men versus cis women are to starting new adult friendships?
Starting new friendships. Well, I mean, I think I can tell you the obvious, which is that starting friendships as you get older becomes increasingly difficult. And it's not just starting friendships, it's starting those very close, intense friendships. When you reach a certain age, if you have kids, you wind up becoming friends with your kids, the parents of your kids' friends, almost by default. Or you become friends with your neighbors because you see them. There's a lot of proximity. So finding those kind of soulmate friends is really hard. I don't know if men and women are different in forming late friendships, but I think the way friendship is expressed can be really different. I think men, and I know this is a cliche, but I found it to be true, men are often like to express friendship in understatement and irony and through just kind of being together, doing something, taking a hike, fishing, having a beer. Whereas
we're making fun of one another was another way that they manifest it.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of there's a kind of intimacy to that. And I think women are a little more earnest, and there's a little bit more about, in my experience anyway, spilling the tea and saying, well, this is what I thought about this experience that I had. This is, and kind of chewing it over that way. So I think there's a difference in the way that the friendships are expressed. I guess I feel, can you hear that loon? There's a loon crying outside.
No, I could.
In the audio there. Anyway, I think it's different, and it's a shame it's hard to make those real close friendships. I had a house full of old college friends over the weekend, and I hadn't seen some of them we hadn't been all together in almost 35 years, and it was really different. It was a different kind of friendship, and so I've been very lucky with my friends, and I in that most of them are still my friends. I lost a couple people in transition, but even those folks have mostly come. We've also managed to work it out. So
Well,
I'll say it.
you mentioned you talk about I'm sorry, you talk about time travel at one point in your book and how it's easy to go. I think this was in talking to Sean while he was working on his time machine, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It's easy to go back, or it's possible to go back as opposed to forward. And when you connect with these friends from college, I suspect that the passage of time kind of disappears.
It does, and it doesn't. There's this kind of wavering that people, if you've known for a long time, one second you're looking at someone who you knew when they were 15, and the next minute you're looking at a person who's 65, and they can be both people at once. It's very cool. I will say, by the way, Sean read this book, and his only correction was that as an engineer, he now understands that actually it's possible to go into the future, but it's not possible to go into the past. And
Oh,
the future,
okay. Well,
we can only go into the future by a few seconds, by astronauts who go like around the Earth. They come back with their watches a little bit faster. It has something to do with the theory of relativity and other things that English majors like me will never understand.
Well, here's something you will understand, and you talk about it in the book. We mentioned it earlier, and that was the issue of pronouns and how they've evolved and continue to do so. Just last week, I read an opinion piece in the New York Times by Andrew Sullivan, and
Oh
it
my
was
God.
titled "How the Gay Rights Movement Radicalized and Lost Its Way." And in this column, he takes issue with, among other things, the ever-expanding glossary of pronouns used these days by people to reflect where they find themselves on the gender spectrum, or not at all. You, on the other hand, write that it's not hard for you to use whatever pronouns someone might prefer. Could you talk to us a little bit about that, and how for you, what someone chooses for their pronouns is not something worth getting all that worked up about?
And it's proper to kind of quickly say that a lot of this sounds weird and silly, and as an English teacher, as an English professor, I can say the plural they, them is a thing I struggled with. But
Me too.
look,
From a purely grammatical standpoint.
Yeah, but look, although grammatically we do use the plural they, them to refer to some things. Well, everyone get their chairs. Well, wait, that's plural. That's not a good example. But let me put it this way. I'm not Catholic, but if I met the Pope, I would say, "It is an honor to meet you, Your Holiness." I'm not a subject of the British Crown, but if I met King Charles, I would say, "It is an honor to meet you, Your Royal Highness, King Charles." If I met, I'm not Jewish, but when I meet my friends, I have a friend who's a rabbi. I say, "Hi, Rabbi." So we call people these by the titles, the honorifics that they wish as a form of respect. Would you call, if your friend was Ms. Jones and she married Mr. Smith and she starts using Mrs. Smith, you're not going to call her Mrs. Jones. You're going to call her Mrs. Smith because that's her name. I had a student at Colby one time who changed his name legally from, I forget what his name was before, but he changed his name to Jedediah Bluebird Earth. Well, what am I going to do? Call him by his old name? I'm going to call him Jedediah Bluebird Earth and say, "Good luck." Good luck. Good luck with that. So there are a lot of hills worth dying over and dying on. The pronoun thing and people's names and titles is really not one of them. I mean, life is hard enough. So, and I know it sounds, the problem is that it's the Andrew Sullivan column really bugged me, because in some ways it sounds so reasonable to say, well, the gay rights movement was okay, we got the marriage thing, but then you guys went too far. Imagine what it's like to hear people say that your fight for dignity and grace is too far. Imagine what it's like for everyone to say, well, the fight for civil rights can go just this far, but not so far as to include you.
Or not so far as to make me uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, because the thing is, transgender people, we're a tiny little minority. There's so much ink spilled and so many tears wept over such a small number of people who who want more than anything else to be left alone, the problem is, because there's so few of us, people think they don't know us. And so there's the sense of, well, this is something I don't understand. It's not something I grew up with. It's just weird. So I think it's bullshit. And just kind of throwing up your hands and saying, I've had it with this. This is all too weird. I mean, I guess it's only human, but it's also not cool. And it's a thing we've heard over and over again over the decades when talking about different minority groups. There are certain phrases we use to describe various people that you would now not say, that we now know you don't use certain language to describe people, and it's language that many of us grew up with. So the problem is, here's this little group of transgender people who just wish that you would all we're saying is make room for us. You don't have to understand it, but you do try to open your heart. And maybe that's the most important thing I have to say. I can talk myself blue in the face about what it means to be trans, and I can describe neurology and brain structure and binary social gender. I can explain all that stuff, but is that going to open anybody's hearts? Well, maybe, but you know what really opens people's hearts? Just being yourself, walking in the world with your head held high and your heart full of love, and maybe seeing. Or, I mean, as we say in writing circles, showing is better than telling. It shouldn't be so unreasonable to ask people to just try to make room for people who are different.
Yeah, we're running out of time, but I want to get in two quick audience questions. One person asked, just super curious, you've already mentioned a few of them, who are some of your favorite authors and why?
Wow. I just finished
in 15 seconds or less.
I just finished reading Wally Lamb's new book, The River Awaits. And I just finished reading the memoir by Geraldine Brooks, who wrote Horse. She has a memoir about losing her husband, Tony Horowitz. It's called Memorial Day, and it's great.
Ah, great. And this one just came in from somebody who's listening right now. This person says, I loved your reading just now when you read the excerpt. Did you consider narrating the whole audiobook of Cleavage?
No, I just did the introduction, and then I had to let it go. I've done the audiobooks for 3 or 4 of my books. It's really hard. So I can let somebody else, a professional person, do that. But that's a fine thing to ask about. I'll say real quick, I want to make sure people know, Ernest Thompson, who wrote On Golden Pond, and I will be in Belgrade Lakes Village on Saturday, is it the 12th or is it the 13th? It's the 12th, Saturday the 12th.
It is the 12th.
And I think it's at 2 p.m. It might be 3, but it's in the afternoon at the Seven Lakes Alliance. And if you go to the Seven Lakes Alliance website, you'll see us there. We're going to read from our new work. Ernest has a new novel, but we're also going to be performing a couple scenes from On Golden Pond with me as the Katharine Hepburn part and Ernest Thompson as the Henry Fonda. So
are you working on You're My Knight in Shining Armor?
Oh, Bill Nimitz, you old poop.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Jenny, I wish we could go for another hour. This has just, as
Yeah, we
always, been wonderful, and uh, I enjoy. I can't decide what I like better, reading you or talking with you, but they're
Bill,
both way
I
up
just
there.
want to say back at you, you are a gift to the people of Maine. You are I would say a national treasure, but really it's a statewide treasure.
Thanks. I'll take it.
As a writer and as person who has always lifted up other writers in this state, I'm just so grateful to be here, and I thank you.
Oh, well, thank you again for being with us. And thanks again to all of you for joining us today. A second shout out to Sherman's Maine Coast Bookshops, the Park Danforth and Coffee by Design for sponsoring tonight's event. Our next book club meeting will be on July 24th at 7 p.m. when we take on Granite Harbor by Peter Nichols. That meeting, as all of them, will be streamed live on Facebook and YouTube. Until then, Jenny, thanks again. Thank all of you and have a great night.